Tomb Raider, a franchise that I and many others hold dear to their hearts. It's a franchise full of breathtaking set pieces, complex level design, and an iconic protagonist. You know her, you love her, the original diva. Everyone welcome to the stage, Lara Croft. Tomb Raider is a franchise I have loved as far back as I can remember. I don't remember the first time I booted up the games, but I do remember spending hours upon hours playing them. I love classic Tomb Raider games and played most if not all of them in my youth, but I'll be so real, a scrub like me was not getting through one of those games. But I was truly in love with Lara and the franchise. I remember my dad taking me to one of his friends' houses before we went home from a trip. My dad's friend must have heard about how much I loved Tomb Raider because he gifted me the first Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider film on VHS. I was ecstatic. As soon as I got home, I asked my parents if we could watch it in the living room on the big TV. Whilst as a kid I loved the games, I was never able to dig deep into them, so the movie was kind of the closest I had gotten to seeing Lara express her personality. That was, of course, until 2006. Tomb Raider Legend was released, and my relationship with the franchise changed forever. It had been some time since I had played a Tomb Raider game. I was now playing the likes of Prince of Persia, Onimusha, DMC, Sonic Adventure, Gears of War, just to name a few. I was a more experienced, wizened gamer, so to speak. And now that I was a little more competent at video games, I had to know what Lara was getting up to in this adventure. The day of reckoning arrives, and I unwrapped Tomb Raider Legend. I booted that bitch up as fast as possible. Even the mini montage that plays right before the game starts had me fucking giddy. Seeing Lara in this new console generation was amazing. She looked better than ever. Though I will say I did miss the classic teal, but what Crystal put together was good too. Before we get into this, just know there will be spoilers for the beginning of the first entries in each iteration of Tomb Raider. It's minor, but if you want to go in completely blind, I would say skip this part. Legend opens up to a younger Lara at the age of just 9 years old on a private plane with her mother, Emilia Croft. Flying over the Himalayas, the plane begins to experience turbulence and then engine failure, causing the plane to crash. Lara and her mother, while stranded in the mountains, waiting for rescue, found shelter in the form of a ruin. Whilst looking for firewood, Lara comes across an ornate stone dais with a sword hilt sticking out, and out of curiosity, she touches the dais, pushing the sword in further. Suddenly, a portal opens. Emilia comes over to see what the commotion is. Lara's mother begins to argue with a voice on the other side of this portal. We can't make out what is being said, but Emilia seems incredibly distressed by this voice, and draws the sword from the stone dais in an attempt to close the portal. As a result, the dais explodes and Emilia is nowhere to be seen. Lara, in shock, leaves behind pages of her diary at the site and wanders off, still holding on to a piece that told her how to reopen the portal. Lara fended for herself for 10 days before making her way to Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, where she found rescue. Cut to an older Lara scaling a cliff, and well, I'll let her tell you where we are.
Alistair, meet Tuanak. She's a lovely pre-Incan civilization, currently in ruins.
Lara had received a tip from an old friend, Anaye Manu, who informs Lara of a stone dais being discovered in Tiwanaku, Bolivia, similar to the one she had encountered as a child, the one that Lara believes took her mother. What she finds leads her down a path of friends long thought buried and the truth behind the fate of her mother. And that's the basic premise of the game. This video isn't a retrospective, so I won't be discussing too much else plot-wise. Some clips might be used in reference to voice acting, and I'll try and mark out where and if there will be spoilers, but if there are any, they will be minimal. So we're going to be talking about Lara's character and what in my opinion is the best version of her, but to do that I kind of need to go over the origins of every version of her. Luckily we basically just did Legend's origin, so let's start the next section off with where it all began. Lara has a unique star power that I feel no other video game character has ever had, being on over 2,300 magazine covers, surpassing the record of 1,200 magazine covers previously held by Giselle Bundchen. Originally created by Core Design, Lara was born into privilege and aristocracy, she never left wanting. Lara received a private education and was awarded many different connections through her family and schooling. One connection by the name of Werner von Croy. Werner became a mentor to Lara briefly and even an inspiration to her archaeological aspirations. At the age of 21, Lara's chartered plane crashed in the Himalayas. Lara, being the only survivor, learned how to fend for herself and depend on her own intellect to stay alive in hostile conditions. After trekking through the Himalayas, Lara found the fictional village of Takakaribi 2 weeks later. This experience changed her worldview profoundly. Lara could no longer stand the stuffy, claustrophobic pretentiousness of British upper-class society. Lara felt alive when she was traveling on her own, the thrill of adventure, the excitement of discovery. From that moment on, a roaring fire lit inside of Lara. She needed to discover more, to learn more, to go further and further than she ever had done before. Unfortunately, her family did not see things the same way and disowned her. Famed for discovering many ancient ruins, artifacts, and archaeological finds nobody had dared dream of, Lara made not only a pretty penny, but also a name for herself, publishing travel books and journals detailing her experiences and expeditions across the world. In 1996, Calcutta, India, Lara has returned from an expedition to capture Bigfoot. Relaxing in the Imperial Hotel lobby, she is approached by a Texan man called Larson. Larson sets up a video call between Lara and his employer, Jacqueline Natler, of Natler Technologies. After failing miserably to convince Lara to complete a job for her by having money rain down on her as she has the conversation with Lara, Lara replies,
I'm sorry, I only play for sport.
Natler does sway Lara to take the job, mentioning the unfound tomb of Kolopek and a trinket. Personally, I'm not sure how Lara wasn't convinced from the moment she saw the theatrics of Natler. Money raining down on her with the bob? I'm on board. When do we leave? With the help of a guide, Lara travels through the snowy Peruvian mountains, eventually reaching a large stone door. After climbing to the top of this door and pressing the very inconveniently placed switch, Peruvian people must have been very tall those centuries ago, the door begins to open, revealing a pack of wolves who unfortunately set themselves upon the guide. Lara, for some reason, needs to cut the rope she's holding onto rather than just let go. As Lara falls, she quickly dispatches the wolves but is unable to save the guide, and enters the tomb alone, the doors closing behind her. This is classic Lara's origin, and I think it's something special. Lara came from a very privileged background and had pretty much every advantage you could think of in this world. Her parents wanted her to be this pretentious, aristocratic, stuffy loser who just sat about being weighted on hand and foot. And Lara said, sod that, I'm off to do a bunch of flips in the rainforest and shoot wildlife, previously thought to be extinct. Also perhaps a teenager on a skateboard holding Uzis. I'm not sorry. Lara chose to break away from her family's fortune and build a life for herself, a life she could be happy with, proud of even. This was pretty cool to me and wildly different for the time period it came out. Lara doesn't have some big motivation most of the time. It's just the sheer joy of new discoveries or the incredibly rewarding challenges she might face. Classic Lara is great. She's witty, charismatic, confident, self-sufficient, and just badass. And most importantly for me, Lara was just doing what she did for the love of the game. She doesn't go into these adventures, most of them, with some big villain to take down or a call to save the world. She's just following her passions. I have never needed Lara to be a hero, and I don't think she really should be. Lara has been a hero in passing for sure, saving the world multiple times, but it is mostly because she's found herself caught up in a situation rather than that being her original goal. So we did go over the intro to LAU Lara and part of her origin. What I'll be doing here is filling in some background information. Whilst Lara still has a plane crash, it happens much earlier in her life, losing her mother as a result. After Amelia died, Lara travelled the world with her father, becoming his apprentice whilst also receiving private tutoring. Later, at the age of 18, Lara's father is presumed dead after his remains cannot be clearly identified. In this version of Lara's origin, she holds great reverence for her parents. They both seem to care for their daughter a great deal, only ever wanting what was best for Lara. Her father, Richard Croft, was an archaeologist too, Lara wanting to follow in his footsteps. This origin, although not as independent as classic Lara's, is still very compelling to me and added much more emotional depth to Lara than we had previously experienced from Tomb Raider games in the past. Unlike classic Lara, Lara's legend counterparts' adventures are fueled by more than just the thrill of adventure and discovery. Lara blamed herself for the disappearance of her mother, and ever since she could, has been searching for the truth of what happened to her. The way Lara holds so much admiration for her parents' really struck something within me. The pain of them not being there, the desperation at times of her wanting to understand the fate of her mother. They make this version of Lara way more endearing and personable, while still maintaining her charm and wit. This iteration of Lara is my all-time favourite. All the confidence, charisma and self-reliance classic Lara had, with more emotional depth added to her character. I would say this is the most nuanced Lara we've ever seen. Lara can be soft, charming, witty, confident, but also furious, angry, ruthless, venom and contempt with every word she says. Sheer rage and emotion, and not only the writers but the voice actor for Lara, Keely Hawes, gets the blend so right. I would not be doing Legend Lara justice if I didn't talk about the amazing performance Keely Hawes puts on for us throughout the game. From her calm, confident, charming moments,
I think you forgot your climbing gear on purpose.
What would give you that idea? Really, Zip. It's like going up a set of stairs, only far less boring.
Tell me about the sword, Takamoto.
What about it? What is it that fascinates you, Ms. Croft?
Let me have a look at it and I'll tell you.
to her more distressed, intense, or emotional moments.
I don't have any idea what you are talking about.
Of course you do. Just name a price.
Ms. Croft, are you deaf?
I don't know. Let's see. Try begging for your life like you did the last time we spoke.
Idiots! You ruined everything!
All these years I blamed myself, and it was you! You killed her!
Killed her? She's not dead! She went where I was supposed to go, where you could have gone!
Makes sense right this second, or I swear I'll execute you where you stand!
I told you to pull out the sword. I told you!
Where is my mother?
Let me tell you, Keely knocks the performances out of the fucking park, man. And to me, was the perfect casting for Lara. I had to put this out there because I've seen some people criticize her performance, some people even saying she doesn't give us any other levels or intensity, like as if she has no range. Which is crazy cuckoo puffs. Are we playing the same game? Are we listening to the same performance right now? The Survivor timeline. It's probably my least favorite origin, and also probably many other Tomb Raider fans as well. And that's no shade to the Survivor timeline. We follow a much greener Lara this time, just getting her start as a Tomb Raider. I appreciate what they tried to do, and how in some aspects I think the Survivor trilogy does things better than the other games before it. But for me, it often falls short when it comes to the characterization of Lara in comparison to the other two series of games. Part of the letdown also probably comes from fans feeling like they were being promised something at the end of each game that was never really coming. Lara was born to Lord Richard Croft and Amelia Croft, once again born into wealth and privilege. Lara spent her early years with her parents, but mostly her mother Amelia, who was an artist, mostly working from home. Unfortunately, the Croft family seems to have some curse put upon them when it comes to air travel, as in this iteration of Lara's origin, Amelia perishes in a plane crash, Lara only 9 years old at the time. Fortunately for this iteration, Lara did not join her mother on the plane ride. Lara's father, devastated by the passing of his wife, became obsessed with finding the key to immortality. Richard had been researching immortality prior to Amelia's passing, but her death caused him to retreat emotionally and dive into his research with even more conviction. His and Lara's relationship suffering in the process. This would only cause a rift between him and Lara as he became neglectful toward her, his obsession and grief clouding his everyday life and fatherly duties. Lara, like most kids in response, began to act out, even locking their butler Winston in the walk-in freezer. Years went by and the rift grew, culminating in a huge argument between Lara and her father. Richard insisting Lara will one day understand. Lara, feeling angry and alone for so many years, snapped and yelled back at Richard that she didn't want to understand and that she just wanted her father back. Later that day, a gunshot rang out from Richard's study. Lara rushed to the scene only to find her father dead, with him assumed to have taken his own life. Her last encounter with her father being an argument. Lara was left in the care of Conrad Roth, somewhat of a father figure to Lara and a longtime friend of the Croft family. Lara paid her way through university, studying at UCL, University College of London. Shortly after starting, she met a girl by the name of Sam, who would soon become one of her closest friends. Roth was hired to be part of a crew for a reality/archaeology TV show known by the name of Whitman's World, hosted by James Whitman, who Lara really admired. Roth was allowed to bring his own crew, selecting Lara knowing she would be a great asset. Whilst planning the expedition, it is revealed that Whitman's show has been canned and so their funding no longer exists. As a last resort, Lara turned to Sam, who cut a deal with her uncle to provide the funding for the expedition. With funding secured, Lara and Echo set out. Whitman very quickly proves himself to be a hack by pushing all the work onto Lara and doing essentially nothing to aid in research besides claiming it's all his own whenever a camera is rolling. This being Lara's first big outing, she was eager to prove herself. Lara pored over charts and texts relating to Yamatai. Her research eventually leads her to the conclusion that Yamatai is located within the Dragon's Triangle. Whitman dismissed her ideas and the crew were overall split. However, no other plans or ideas were being pushed forward. So Roth, having faith in Lara, puts his foot down and sets her idea into action by making way for the Dragon's Triangle. As they make their way, Lara was relaxing in her cabin, and suddenly a massive storm surrounded the ship, launching Lara from her bed. Whilst fleeing her cabin, Lara attempted to find safety but was hit by a torrent of water, flooding the corridor and trapping her. Lara almost drowns, but is rescued by her friend Jonah, or at least that's how it looks to be. When Lara finally gets her bearings, Jonah isn't there. Instead, the ship is torn apart, Rough on the other side of the huge gap. Lara summons everything within her to attempt to leap across. Roth grabs her but is unable to keep his grip on her and lets go, Lara plummeting into the ocean. She manages to make it to shore but is quickly knocked unconscious by an unknown man. And that's the basic premise for the Survivor timeline. I did include some preamble as I thought it was needed to help highlight some of the relationships and dynamics she had with her family. This, isolated, is actually a really good origin for Lara. I still prefer how certain events play out in Legend, but this is very sound. Even if this is my least enjoyed origin, something I think Crystal Dynamics did phenomenally well was taking core experiences from classic Tomb Raider games and incorporating it into the lore as a little nod to the fans who have stuck with the franchise. If we go back and take a look at this section of Lara's origin, for the uninitiated among you, locking Winston in the walking freezer in the classic Tomb Raider games is a rite of passage all Tomb Raider fans should experience at least once in their lifetime. Locking Winston in the freezer is something I did every time I booted up a classic Tomb Raider game. Call it cruel, call it elder abuse, call it hypothermia. That old man scared me as a kid and I needed him to stop chasing me right now.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
I do realise now as an adult he was just trying to offer me tea and some little treats. Poor guy, he's been through so much. Is he in pain? Doesn't it seem like he's in pain? Lara, tell this man to retire. Jesus Christ, give him his pension. Some say he's still trapped in that freezer till this day, his tray shaking in eager anticipation to serve Lady Croft some tea and sweet treats. But alas, that day never comes. Winston is forced to live in this hellish Groundhog Day where he is routinely led into the walk-in freezer and then backflipped over as Lara closes the door, trapping him inside until it all resets and happens again. Anyway, I appreciate that they took the time to do that. I think it's neat. I noticed in this origin that Lara's relationship with her father is a lot different. Though she still holds a lot of reverence for him, she's definitely been conflicted about his actions and maybe still is. Richard is noticeably more distant, refusing to let Lara come on expeditions with him. While in the Legend timeline, after the passing of her mother, Lara spends most of her time with Richard on expeditions and receiving private tutoring from him and others on occasion. Honestly, I think both iterations work well for us to still feel the impact that Richard's death left on Lara. Another thing I'll commend the Survivor trilogy on is that it all interconnects with each other. In the other origins, a lot of the background information I felt didn't need to be dropped in, as it all felt pretty remote or removable from the core origin, but a lot of this feels critical. Hence the longer origin section for this timeline. As mentioned earlier, whilst I appreciate what the Survivor trilogy tried to do with Lara's character, unfortunately by the end of the second game my patience was wearing thin. I understand that these games are meant to be about Lara finding herself and becoming the famed Tomb Raider we all know and love. However, it just felt like at the pace we were going, we were never going to get there, and I guess I was right. After the third game, Lara still didn't feel like she had made much, if any, progress at all toward becoming the Tomb Raider she's meant to be. Hell, to me, in some instances, it felt like she backslid on all the progress and development she had gotten in the second game. I wanted cool, ass-kicking, gunslinging, sword-swinging, hammer-wielding, zero fucks given Lara. So to play through 3 games and not see any real payoff in that direction was a letdown for a lot of fans. Another thing that I personally didn't care for with this iteration is just how much Lara relies on her friends and contacts, at least in the first game of the series. And whilst you could say Lara has this in the Legend games too, I would argue that it's not quite the same. In the Survivor trilogy, Lara's companions or contacts are often close by and or in regular contact with her. In Legend, Lara has Alistair and Zip in her ear, but that's as much as we get from them. Also, I know these two get a lot of hate, but I actually didn't mind them. Granted, some of their dialogue isn't amazing, but it's camp. To be fair, I probably like them so much since I think they are heavily inspired by the two characters from the movie, Hillary and Bryce, who served the same purpose. I think it's also fair to say that people didn't dislike the characters themselves, but were not pleased with just how vocal they were. A common love for the classic Tomb Raider games is the silence and feeling of isolation that was created by Lara being alone, barring some enemies of course. Lara going into these massive unknown tombs or archaeological sites, unafraid of what she might find, really spoke to her courage, and perhaps that's what people identified with most when playing the classic games. I think Underworld, Legend's sequel game, objectively does a better job at balancing the radio chatter with Zip and Alistair, and manages to return some of the feeling of isolation that was so present in the original games. Though for me personally, I think they pulled back just a little too much. I always enjoyed the back and forth Lara had with the two, and thought it gave more life to Lara's character. She's not just cracking jokes with them, at times she shows emotional vulnerability too. Any other contacts Lara has within Legend are just present for that mission or brief interaction. An example of this is Anaya Imanu. The way Lara's friends or contacts work within Legend is pretty much how Kim Possible's contacts work. What I mean is, Kim always has a contact somewhere she's helped or worked with before, but when we see them in the current adventure, they are just there to point us in the right direction or provide a resource and dip. I think Tomb Raider works best when the game is focusing on Lara and the world's artifacts, treasures, supernatural and sometimes godly phenomena she is discovering. I would say as we progress through the trilogy, the only companion she has is Jonah, and I actually quite enjoy their brother-sister bond that they have. Just to know, I will be mentioning Underworld and Anniversary gameplay here as it's an extension of Legend, Anniversary serving as a prequel and Underworld as a sequel. There won't be any spoilers relating to Underworld as I just plan to talk about the gameplay. Tomb Raider Legends gameplay loop is relatively simple but enjoyable, and I think it worked really well for the franchise. Really, Legend isn't so different from its classic predecessors. It's an action-adventure game with puzzle and platforming elements. The classic games were action-adventure games but leaned more heavily into the puzzle platforming side of things. The classic games had a range of puzzles that either relied on physics, platforming, or even straight up playing a 5,000-year-old Egyptian board game known as Senet. Most of the modern games toned down how difficult puzzles were, leaning into more platforming physics-based puzzles in comparison to the classics. Though I should mention some of Survivor's later tombs become more challenging as the games go on. Movement and platforming worked via a grid system in the classic games, which whilst very precise could be a bit of a task to control at times. Though I think after an hour or two of gameplay most people could pick up the basics. Lara's default is to run, but she can walk too, allowing you to walk up to a ledge and not fling yourself off like so. Walking also allows you to move through spikes unharmed. Lara can jump forward, backwards, sideways, she can spin around whilst in the air, she can also scale ledges and pull herself up. Lara has access to a tumble that lets her turn around with speed. Later games add more mechanics either specific to that game or just innovating on the formula for future titles. Tomb Raider 3 added sprint sliding, which allowed Lara to sprint and then slide to get under tight closing doors like the one in her manor. Ignore how badly that went, she could do it, I promise. Lara can also swim. Swimming can feel clunky at first, but again after an hour or two of the game, I think it's pretty simple to get the hang of. Lara can move about freely while swimming. She also has access to a maneuver similar to her on-land tumble, where she spins around to face the opposite direction. Combat was pretty basic, arming you with Lara's iconic twin pistols. You can flip seamlessly through the air while shooting at various wildlife, or teenagers on skateboards. I'm watching you. Throughout levels, if you know the right places to look, you can collect various items such as med packs or other guns on certain maps such as the shotgun, the magnums, or the twin Uzis. Also ammo for these guns as they have a limited supply due to doing more damage than the twin pistols. The LAU and the Survivor trilogy scrapped the grid-based system and implemented more fluid movement controls, although these changes came with their own problems. Due to the grid system not being present, platforming became a lot less precise, but on the other hand a bit easier to control. When Lara actually does what you want her to do. I will preface this next part with that I only have access to the PC version of these games, so I'm not sure what the experience is like on console. But my god, the issues of the PC port are insane. Now this is 2006 and then 2008 for Tomb Raider Underworld, so PC ports were pretty terrible anyway. Here's all the problems I ran into trying to play these games. Whenever I boot up Tomb Raider Legend, it shoves all of my windows and tabs to my next monitor. I would put it in windowed mode, but this this feature doesn't exist in Legend or Underworld. Fortunately, there is a custom DLL file made by the members of the Tomb Raider community that allows you to enable windowed mode for all 3 LAU Tomb Raider games. Unfortunately, I could only get this to work for Legend and Anniversary, but other people have had success, so it is more than likely something up with my install of Underworld. If you want to play the LAU games on PC, you're gonna need an Xbox One controller or an Xbox 360 controller, as that's the only controllers that work with this game at the moment. Lara climbs things really inconsistently. If she comes at a ladder at an angle, she's climbing that ladder via her right hip now, and she will not be told otherwise. I could tolerate it if it was just a visual bug, but occasionally this can cause Lara to fail jumps or get stuck on objects that she shouldn't be stuck on. When swinging from a pole, you are able to switch the direction Lara is facing mid-swing, and she's supposed to do a nice little animation to show this. This is broken for me, and it caused me to die a few times because she just kind of flings herself off into the side of the wall. The physics issues pop up even more on certain levels. The section in the King Arthur level for Tomb Raider Legend was a disaster. The game kept freaking out and throwing Lara about whenever I jumped. She fell so many times. I did later find out this is due to VSync being turned off, but I had already finished my playthrough by the time I found this out. So if you're experiencing this issue, try this, it fixed most of the bugs for me. Lara can also swim in the LAU games. Swimming in these games felt easier to me than in the classic games, but not by much. Just like in the classic games, you have free movement while swimming, and you can do all the usual stuff. Except for the underwater tumble Lara had in the classic games, LAU Lara never seems to learn that trick. Combat is very simple but serves its purpose for the game. Lara has access to a few gadgets and her trademark twin pistols. She's also able to pick up weapons from enemies she's defeated along the way. Lara has very limited access to physical combat, but can indeed kick a bitch by aiming at them and pressing the Y or triangle button. Lara can also do a handspring kick by walking up to an enemy, jumping and then pressing Y if you're aiming at them, and she'll do the handspring kick. Lara can also straight up do a tumble routine into the enemies and they will be sent flying. There is also a slide which knocks enemies into the air as well. Lara is also able to enter bullet time / max pain mode by leaping off her enemies and filling them with bullets. Lara also has access to grenades and she can carry 4 at a time. Though the range on them isn't amazing, they can come in handy. Med packs are dotted around levels as well as enemies dropping them after being defeated. Lara can only carry 3 at a time though, so be sure to min-max fellas. Clearly hasn't found that bottomless bag she had in the classic games then yet, has she? I was hoarding medkits in those games. Hoarding. Targeting enemies is easy enough, just pull the left trigger to aim and the right trigger to shoot. You can switch targets by using the analog stick, though I have found this isn't always super responsive. Lara is now more agile than in the classic games, able to do multiple flips and handsprings by either spamming the jump button and or the dodge / roll button. This added such flair to the game and so much personality to Lara. Anytime there was an open space in the game, I was pretty much flipping any place I could go. You can do this continuously if you just mix and match your inputs, so roll, jump, 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 so on and so forth. I appreciate that Crystal did this because they really didn't have to, but it added so much personality through gameplay to Lara. And let me tell you, Lara has always been that girl and she's always been extra.
She's got a point. She's an icon. She's a legend. And she is the moment. Now, come on now.
Anniversary doesn't really change the gameplay up too much. Some of the platforming is tighter and more ambitious, adding a few more mechanics such as balancing on beams and grapple wall running. This game is certainly more puzzle focused than the others in its iteration due to it being a remake of the original Tomb Raider, with less of a focus on human enemies and going back to what a lot of older Tomb Raider fans really enjoyed about the game, which is just fighting wildlife or mythical beings, and giving back that sense of wonder and isolation of exploring a ruin untouched by man for hundreds or thousands of years. Unfortunately, where there was some refinement in platforming, there were still a few bugs that made platforming feel janky at times. Underworld, whilst adding a few more mechanics to the platforming / climbing sections of the game, fails to really tighten up the gameplay. As well as being buggier than the prior 2 titles, at least in my experience of the game, platforming also feels janky. Lara is constantly stumbling over things and getting caught on pieces of the environment when she shouldn't. Half the time, the biggest op in this game is the fucking camera. I'm in a life or death battle trying to navigate a ledge. It ruins that air of elegance that I love about her in Legend. Sometimes Lara will make leaps she shouldn't have, but then also not make leaps she definitely should have. Sometimes the game speeds itself up for just a second when making a jump, which is also odd and is what I think led to me making jumps I probably shouldn't have. Lara also seems to take more full damage in this game, and I'm not sure if it's because of the slightly fucky physics in the game or if it's just the choice that they made. Underworld doesn't do much to innovate on combat, but they do add multiple weapon types, with limited ammo supply that we can access whenever we like via our PDA menu. Underworld also added underwater combat. Unfortunately, you can't actually punch sharks in this game. Absolute cinema, by the way. But you can shoot spear guns at them or your handguns, though they will be less effective. It's fun for the first set piece of the game, but honestly, it's not that big of a game changer. Unfortunately, they took away one of my favorite things when it came to Legend, and that was the Max Payne bullet time mechanic they had. It now comes in the form of a manual activation, but you can't backflip off of enemies anymore, so boo, hiss, boo, tomato, tomato, tomato. It was a ton of fun, and it added a lot of style, so I was sad to not see it in this game. Underworld probably brought us the most agile and fluid Lara we've ever seen in the entire series though, adding a few new moves to her kit and techniques for platforming. They did unfortunately limit how many flips we could do as they did in Anniversary, which was a bummer for me. The games are still fun, but I missed that flair of being able to endlessly loop the flips. Although I love the LAU games for how they characterize Lara, I must admit the gameplay isn't as polished as I'd like it to be. For me, both Classic and Survivor eras of Tomb Raider feel far more polished overall in comparison. I know each era has its own set of problems, but these games have felt the best to play, at least on modern hardware. Though, to be fair, I have access to the classic remasters, so that's probably why it feels better to play on modern hardware. I think without these, I wouldn't have started replaying the classic games. I think a remaster or remake for the LAU series of games would fix a lot of these issues and help bring them in line with other iterations. In terms of gameplay for the Survivor trilogy, platforming feels a lot more floaty in comparison to the other games, which is pretty good, but I still prefer Legend's style of parkour, though I do like the wall bounce mechanic they added in the Survivor trilogy, adding more mechanics to the later Survivor trilogy games such as a grapple, but this does have limits in comparison to the Legend grapple, at least in terms of maneuverability. Lara has also decided she's in a Soulsborne style game where she can only dodge roll, no more fancy flips for Lara, just clambering and dodge rolling for her. Rise of the Tomb Raider, the second game in the 2013 reboot trilogy, added swimming to the mix. Unfortunately, the swimming in Rise feels really clunky. Swimming in the second game is pretty much on rails and usually only used as a mini loading screen to load the next area, much like Lara squeezing through a gap. There are very limited open areas, for example a combat zone where you have to go between holes in the ice to stealth kill Trinity soldiers. It's pretty much impossible to drown even before the game gives you a rebreather, unless you really mess up a quicktime event of some sort. Shadow of the Tomb Raider added bigger areas when it came to swimming and gave the ability to farm resources whilst underwater. Swimming also serves a purpose in some puzzles, but this is mostly just for navigation. For Shadow of the Tomb Raider, swimming is greatly improved and feels a lot smoother than Rise has ever felt. In this trilogy of games, combat is more cover shooter based, following in Uncharted's footsteps, which as a Tomb Raider fan I always found really frustrating. I remember at the time when these games came out, people would often refer to Lara as female Nathan Drake. Part of that I feel comes from ignorance of the player base at the time, but also people saying that kind of weren't wrong, at least in terms of gameplay. But never forget this, Uncharted fans, Lara is the original psychopath.
You have disrespected me. You have broken into my house. You have killed my men.
I've simplified your payroll. And now, if you don't mind, I'll streamline your inventory.
Lara says this after killing multiple Yakuza, which to me is such an insane response to what this man said, even if you are trying to murder each other. I'm saying this like there should be a vendetta. There shouldn't. We should have community, because we're so similar. This is Lara's origin, so she doesn't have her iconic twin pistols yet, as she's not grown into the Tomb Raider she's meant to be. Or so the devs keep telling us. Unfortunately, in these trio of games, she doesn't ever really become that. Lara's iconic weapon in these games is a bow! Yay! A bow, yay! This trilogy came out in a specific time period where I felt every game with a leading woman needed to shove a bow of some sort into their hands. Listen, I like bows, they're pretty cool. Women wielding bows? Even cooler. I'm just a sucker for Legend/Classic Lara, and we were highly saturated with the amount of games adding a bow into them. Lara of course has access to other weapons as you progress through the game, but the bow is what I saw most of the time in advertising material and on game covers. It's also her starting equipment in every game. These games also focus on more human enemy encounters, especially the first game in the series, which doesn't ever really matter to me. But some fans prefer the feeling of wonder and isolation that the classic games provided, being one of the first to discover or explore an ancient civilization, ruin or tomb, and I can understand why. Skill trees of sorts were also added in these entries, allowing you to increase how much salvage you got from crates or resources you gathered from animals and wildlife, better stealth kills, just to name a few. Weapons also became upgradable in these games, allowing you to improve recoil control, damage dealt, reload speed, and things of that nature with all the salvage and resources you gather. Crafting is a fairly big part of the game, collecting resources to craft new tools, ammo, and even outfits that offer different bonuses. I think this mechanic is fine, it works for the game since this version of Lara isn't always kitted out like Classic or Legend Lara, so she has to be more crafty, but I could take it or leave it for the next set of games if I'm honest. One thing I did really enjoy from the Survivor series is the reading of monoliths, murals, old scrolls and text in order to gain some understanding of a language or culture. I love the process of slowly piecing together a language and her understanding of different cultures, not just in cutscenes but in gameplay. It fit in with the world of Tomb Raider so well. As well as being able to collect relics and have Lara talk about their history and who they could have belonged to or what the purpose of that item might have been. It lends itself to her archaeological roots. I really hope to see something like this in future games, whether that's in the upcoming remake or the new game coming, but maybe in a bit more of an involved process than just reading stuff. Make us really feel like an archaeologist. I think it would be a great idea since from the trailers we've seen, it looks like they're going for a fusion of Survivor and LAU gameplay for the next set of Tomb Raider games. When it comes to level design, Legend and Underworld are pretty basic but in different ways. Legend has smaller scale levels that are pretty linear with some offshoots here and there, but they aren't big or exciting, usually amounting to a small ledge or room with a secret or artifact. So, levels usually consist of climbing, then combat, more climbing, some form of physics-based puzzle, more climbing and or combat, so on and so forth. With Legend, you tend to be in a particular location or country for 1 to 2 levels with an occasional on-rails vehicle section in between to transition to the next section of the level. When Lara meets Anaya in Peru, their conversation is interrupted by some mercenaries. Anaya escapes, but the mercenaries give chase. Lara pursues them on a bike in one of these on-rail vehicle sections. After this vehicle section is over, Anaya and Lara head to an old dig site in Paraíso. For the most part, I'm okay with this type of design. It's dated for sure, but still fun. I like that we're traveling to different places in the world. Again, I think Tomb Raider is at its best when Lara is jet-setting about the place. I love being able to explore other places and cultures, and it doesn't have to be set in one place for the entire game. That is something that I think is greatly missed in the Survivor series. You're locked to one location aside from a few story-specific moments in some games. On one hand, I know this lets us truly engross ourselves in a particular location's culture, and allows for more organic exploration when it comes to finding tombs and ruins. And I really like the exploration the bigger maps offer in the Survivor series, but I do also miss being able to go to different locations. I hope that the later Tomb Raider games go back to a globe-trotting style Lara. I have heard that the latest game in the timeline is going to be set exclusively in India, and that does sound like a great setting. But going forward, after the remake, after Catalyst, I hope the franchise perhaps look at doing these more open maps but smaller scale and having maybe 4 different locations to start with. The original Tomb Raider had us exploring 4 different countries/locations. Going back quickly to the vehicle sections in Tomb Raider Legend, they violently overstay their welcome. These sections go on for at least 10 minutes straight, and I just don't understand why. They're not particularly well made sections either. Underworld does allow for the use of Lara's bike, and thank the heavens they let you have complete control over it. No more of the on-rails bullshit. However, you can kind of tell this was only included because they made their level size bigger without really filling it with anything meaningful. Underworld takes more cues from classic Tomb Raider, and some fan feedback from Tomb Raider Legends release. So, for Underworld, a lot of levels consist of parkouring through ruins, and completing mostly physics-based puzzles with some other types thrown in, with minor combat engagements scattered throughout the levels. Some levels in the game lean into combat more than the others. Underworld unfortunately has a problem where most if not all of its puzzles/levels are symmetrical, so once you've done a task on one side, you'd have to go to the other side of the section or sometimes an entire level and repeat the process. Whilst I appreciate the devs tried to amp up the scale for this game, it does feel like my time isn't being respected and also a bit of a cop-out that I just have to repeat the same puzzle I already did but mirrored. Anniversary's design is certainly more puzzle focused as it's referencing work created by the original dev team, whose game focused on more puzzle-based gameplay and puzzle platforming gameplay. Anniversary's level structure followed much like the classic games, having linear level design but big open offshoots for the player to explore and find secrets or items to help them along their adventure.
Welcome back to my humble abode. Feel free to take a look around.
Ah, Croft Manor. Exploring Croft Manor was always my favourite thing to do in the classic Tomb Raider games. Mostly because I sucked at video games, so making any progress wasn't going to happen. Either way, I digress. Croft Manor became a playground of sorts for me, to just mess around and maybe learn a thing or two about the game. I remember playing the games with my friends and talking about what might be behind one of the doors we were struggling to open with childlike wonder. Probably helped that we were children and didn't know much about Lara or her adventures ourselves, but even if we did, Lara has done some pretty nutty stuff, so I imagine whatever we cooked up wouldn't have even scratched the surface.
I mean, it's just a job after all, isn't it? Some people deliver the post, I jump over rivers and fight tigers.
In the classic games, Croft Manor is pretty expansive after the first game, with secrets and hidden areas tucked about the place. Some of these secrets included an ATV course, a giant aquarium / fish tank, a room with artifacts or trophies from previous adventures Lara had been on, just to name a few. It's a massive playground for the player to mess about in if they don't want to play the main game, and younger me always loved exploring Croft Manor. For me, it's a very important part of any Tomb Raider game. The house also included a gymnasium and an obstacle course that is used to teach the player the main mechanics of the game. A lovely walk-in freezer to store various food items. What made the Croft Manor great to me is that with every iteration, something new was present, and it just made it so refreshing. Some of the features I mentioned earlier about Croft Manor are specific to different versions of Croft Manor. For example, the ATV course is specific to Tomb Raider 3. I loved Croft Manor. I loved that there was an outdoor area and loads of secrets to discover whilst exploring, puzzles and trials to complete. This was a nice little mode for anyone who wasn't amazing at the game or just didn't like the combat in the game. For people who just wanted to climb, jump and explore, lock a butler in the walk-in freezer. When I first played Tomb Raider Legend, I must admit I was a little disappointed with Croft Manor, mostly just because unlike the prior games you couldn't go outside, which is a big shame in my books. I loved exploring the manor grounds, it was some of my favourite parts of Croft Manor. I really hope for the remake and for Catalyst that they bring back Croft Manor. I know we're probably not getting it for Catalyst considering we're going to be in India. Though, to be fair, I don't see why they couldn't do it. Lara's usually all over the globe, but we still get to explore her
humble abode.
So, here's hoping they allocate some resources there. Not high hopes, but some. Maybe. Please? Please? Listen, I'm so desperate I'll take DLC. Just make it a free roam style Croft Manor like back in the day. I really don't want a linear story mission that ends after 2 hours. What I will say about Legends Croft Manor is that it's pretty intricate with how its puzzles and parts of the house link to each other, as opposed to being a random secret or isolated feature that you would find in the older games. Though not being super advanced or anything, there were 1 or 2 puzzles I had to look up. Though overall this version of Croft Manor probably has more to offer and more to do than its classic counterpart, it just didn't feel as fun as the other iterations. Maybe that's nostalgia talking, maybe it's me wanting to lock an elderly man in a walk-in freezer, who knows? What I will say is that I feel like the classic ones have just a bit more soul to them. Alright, Tomb Raider Underworld, can't wait to play this. No Croft Manor. Maybe we unlock it as we play? I guess we'll start. Well, I think there was a missed opportunity to have Croft Manor midway through construction to explore as a reward for finishing the game. Alas, all we got were 2 DLC missions exclusive to Xbox, which are actually both part of the true ending to the game, so a bunch of us have never played the true ending. Very cool, Microsoft. Anniversary's manor is pretty decent considering the original Tomb Raider didn't really have a manor to play in. It was just a brief tutorial on controls as the manor was undergoing renovations and could not be completed by the time we arrived to play the game. So for this being a remake of the original game, this isn't that bad. It's similar-ish to Legends Croft Manor, but with an outside that we could go about. It still didn't feel as grand as some of the other classic Tomb Raider games manors, Tomb Raider 3 having my favourite Croft Manor, but it certainly felt like more work was put into this version of the manor, making it feel more lived in. Having random books, historical journals and articles relating to myths and legends scattered around the manor for Lara to read through. Pre-warning for this part of the video, there are going to be some light spoilers for the DLC mission on Rise of the Tomb Raider Blood Ties. It is mostly background knowledge and not needed for the main game, but a lot of this was still very nice to experience on my own, and so I recommend you do the same. Feel free to come back after and watch this part of the video, but also if you don't care, go ahead and watch. Unfortunately, Survivor Lara only gets access to the Croft Manor in the form of a DLC story mission, in which Lara enters the manor to find proof of her inheritance of the manor, as currently Atlas, Amelia's brother, is pursuing it fiercely, holding a grudge against Richard Croft, and now Lara due to her pursuing the same research her father was. Atlas says this is the reason he can't in good conscience give Lara the house, but does mention he is willing to talk about letting her live there for a monthly stipend out of her trust, which is pretty messed up considering this is her childhood home. Even though you only ever hear from Atlas through writing or through other accounts of people speaking about him, he just feels so slimy. Maybe just like Richard, grief is also clouding his mind with anger and bitterness. Atlas wholeheartedly blames Amelia's death on Richard. Amelia flying over to be with Richard to celebrate his discovery is what ultimately led to the end of her life in his eyes. Which is a little awkward, should we say, as Amelia would probably be alive if she had flown over with Richard. Unfortunately, she felt the need to stay back to appease Atlas, as he was going to try and have Richard's dig shut down. If Amelia didn't have to deal with Atlas's concerns, things might have been very different. The DLC consists of exploring a dilapidated Croft Manor. It hasn't been maintained for some time, clearly. You explore the manor, collecting various documents, journal entries, and letters amongst other things, left by mostly Richard, Amelia, and Winston, along with some very light puzzle solving, giving us much more of an insight into Lara's family and childhood, as well as her relationships with these people before and after her mother's passing. In the main game, you get the idea that Lara's relationship with her father is strained and that he's cold and distant, but through this mission we learn that Richard cared for Lara a great deal. He was just drowning in his grief, occasionally able to pull himself out of his research to spend time with Lara, and when he did, she loved it. When Lara was younger, for her birthday, Richard and Winston planned an Egyptian-themed treasure hunt. Lara was obsessed with learning about Egypt, memorizing different hieroglyphics and ancient Egyptian districts. We get to hear past conversations and memories play out as we journey through the manor, and a lot of them are really sweet, and help to give us some insight as to what Lara's childhood was like. I also adored the Easter eggs they left in for long-time fans whilst exploring this version of Croft Manor. Some examples are Lara finding a jade figurine of a dragon. Richard found this in China, believing it was linked to the Temple of Xi'an. Lara mentions wanting to look into this someday. This is a reference to Tomb Raider 2, or that Amelia before meeting Richard was engaged to the Earl of Farringdon. Lara in her classic origin was engaged to the Earl before blowing off the engagement after her plane crash. A lot of the relics found in the house acknowledge past iterations' adventures, which seems a bit weirder now that we're going with a unified timeline. Lara's a time traveler? We do hear some thoughts on Anna, but nothing past Lara's usual of not really caring for her, especially since the DLC mission takes place after the end of Rise. My biggest want from the first game in the Survivor trilogy was to be able to go to the Croft Manor, and we got it for Rise, but in the most monkey's paw way possible. Don't get me wrong, the DLC itself is actually really interesting and makes me enjoy Survivor's Lara a lot more, as well as the background lore surrounding her. But I am certainly missing that big playground aspect from the classic games. I hope that for the next set of games we can get an amalgamation of these iterations of the Croft Manor. I would love to have more lore drops within the Croft Manor, personal anecdotes, memories, facts about history, anything of that nature, but also have it be a big fun playground like in the classic games. We do briefly get to see a Croft Manor that wasn't in ruins in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. It maybe wasn't in its prime with odd bits here and there needing work, but this version of the Croft Manor was absolutely gorgeous. You play as a younger Lara in the main story. She's meant to be doing her homework, but unbeknownst to her father, she is on a treasure hunt. I won't go into too much detail, as once again I think this is also best experienced rather than having it all explained to you, and this video is already long enough, as I probably mentioned already. It's clear that Lara looked up to Richard and his career, very much wanting to follow in his footsteps. We saw in Rise that Lara is clearly enamored with history and the idea of discovering ancient ruins and artifacts and civilizations to uncover truths once thought myths. And this flashback, this memory, it adds to that. We're able to find notes and things across the manor and its grounds that clue us into Lara's life and also her relationship with her father, as well as written communication between Richard and Winston. One letter revealing that Lara was starting to forget what little she had remembered of her mother. Winston urging Richard to stop shutting the grief and Lara out, so that he and Lara can both process and become closer to each other again. Richard, however, didn't take kindly to this and threatens to fire Winston if he persists. We also get to witness some memories of Lara's uncovered by the end of the flashback, demonstrating the closeness she had with Amelia when she was younger. Lara had felt her father's absence for a while. Even before her mother's passing, Richard worked almost non-stop, and it's reflected in a childhood painting of hers, only painting herself and her mother together. When asked, "Where is your father?" by Amelia, Lara explains that he's obviously at work. Mind you, Lara doesn't say this begrudgingly, but it's clear that Richard's absence is very much felt. This clearly troubled Amelia to some degree, causing numerous disagreements between the two. Nothing relationship shattering, but certainly a strain on the two, probably also not helped by the tensions with Amelia's family. Although we only get to see a very limited section of the manor, it's still really gorgeous, and even looking out at the courtyard and the maze, the entrance with the water fountain, it just brings back so much nostalgia. It's a reimagined version, but I think it honors the original. Also, no wonder the manor in Rise is so dilapidated. Lara probably annihilated the place with her treasure hunt. I really wish we had gotten a full-scale playable version of this outside of the story, but here's hoping we get something like that in the coming Tomb Raider games. So there will be some spoilers here as I'm talking about potential issues with the unified timeline. You have been warned. Go now or forever hold your peace. With the most recent announcements of not one but 2 Tomb Raider games coming our way, I think we can only be excited / hopeful that Crystal will give us a Lara that fans of every iteration can appreciate. And with the trailers we've seen, I for one am pretty excited and think at least the remake shows a ton of potential. I personally think it would be a good idea for Crystal to take the Resident Evil route of development, 2 projects developed concurrently, a remake and a continuation of the main story whilst also rewriting or adjusting parts of their canon to fit the new timeline or direction they want to take Tomb Raider in. It is probably unrealistic for them to remake every single Tomb Raider, but I think some of the fan favourites wouldn't go amiss. And also games that maybe deserve a second chance at being what they were originally meant to be. I'm looking at you, Angel of Darkness. With the new unified timeline, I think this would be a great choice. I think they are going with Survivor's timeline as the basis, which still works for the most part, but I think sticking with the fate of Lara's parents via the Legend games makes more sense to me. The problem with Crystal using the Survivor origin as the basis rather than LAU is that it would change Lara's motivations for that trilogy of games. All iterations have a different fate for Lara's parents. The only real commonality is that Lara has a life-defining plane crash occurring in the Himalayas, resulting in either the loss of her mother or a new motivation to see the world and experience new adventures. Lara has no reason to travel to Peru and find that stone dais. She isn't led down a trail that leads her to Avalon because she knows where her mother's remains are. Natla is no longer the reason for Richard Croft's demise, so Lara has no real personal motivation towards wanting Natla dead. I think a serviceable solution to the Natla problem is as follows, and this is off top of the dome, so don't drag me. Natla has been a part of Trinity this entire time, and also made a case for Richard to be murdered just as Dominguez had. Again, this is just a brief thought. When I get around to doing the unified timeline video, I will hopefully have more well thought out ideas for what that timeline could look like. I suppose ultimately we won't know until Legacy of Atlantis drops though, and I'm really curious to see what they do with Natla in regards to Richard and Lara. If Crystal do pursue the remake route like Capcom, this could let them go in and tidy up some of the plot holes / differences left by the melding of continuities. Currently, very little has been revealed to us about the unified timeline, from what I can see anyway. With the new games on their way, I hope to see a fusion of all 3 playstyles. The world and character building gameplay of the Survivor series through reading monuments, murals, texts and scrolls, piecing together her understanding of a culture and language bit by bit. The fluid gameplay and characterization of Lara from Legend and Underworld, which, seeing the remake trailer, I think we are potentially at least getting that fluidity back. And finally, the complex platforming puzzles and wonder that the classic games brought to many of us through discovering isolated ruins for the very first time. Tomb Raider Legend, Anniversary, and Underworld are by far my favourite characterization of Lara, Legend being the predominant portrayal of her that I enjoy. Lara is charming, fun, vulnerable, quippy, emotional, passionate, and most importantly, fucking badass. Some of the dialogue in the game isn't always the best, and the level design and gameplay can leave more to be desired, especially some of the boss fights that don't have much, if any, strategy involved at all. Also, with how simple a lot of the levels are in the game and how short the game is overall, you can easily finish the game in a couple of hours. But I adore this version of Lara. And I am biased, probably because this was the first Tomb Raider game I ever finished. Probably because it's, I think, the easiest Tomb Raider game to finish, but I finished it. I finished it and I finished others. And I have proof. Don't look at my Steam achievements. I just think this iteration of Lara overall is so much fun and so nuanced at the same time, and I really hope with the next set of games we get a return to form in that aspect. Legend Lara is also my favourite version of Lara voice acting wise. Keely Hawes did such a fantastic job and to me is the perfect Lara Croft. She nails those fun quippy moments whilst also being able to switch to a more emotional, soft, reminiscent side of Lara.
Isn't she beautiful? I'm falling in love all over again.
You say that to all the ruins.
I'm a terribly lucky girl.
Whilst also being able to bring the heat, anger and passion when Lara is furious and full of rage.
You destroyed my home. You killed Alistair! I got what I wanted. Isn't that all we care about? You can die too!
Lara, you really are a woman after my own heart.
I will never stop praising Keely Hawes' performance in this game. I almost wish they recast her for the current games. They were even using her as late as 2023 for some horrible mobile game, so I don't see why they couldn't bring her on. To be fair to Alex, I think she is also a great choice and will do a fantastic job. I just have a soft spot for Keely. I loved the Avalon storyline, and when the game ended on a cliffhanger, I was so excited for Underworld to come around to find out the fate of Lara's mother. I still thoroughly enjoyed Underworld and its story, but I can see why people might have had some qualms, especially since part of it is locked behind 2 Xbox exclusive DLC missions. Anniversary was a look at Lara's first adventure, reimagined by Crystal Dynamics and sandwiched between the releases of their main Tomb Raider games, carrying their continuity forward. Whilst it did add to some sections of the game, it also heavily cut away material from the original game. I actually enjoyed Anniversary for what it was, but I can understand why some old school fans weren't happy. Back in the day, I remember this splitting the fan base, and I only really remember hearing mostly negative comments when referring to this game. But I think as time has gone on, there has been more appreciation for Anniversary. I would say that actually applies to the whole of the LAU games, even the Survivor trilogy. As time has gone on, people have reassessed some harsh criticisms. I noticed whilst doing research for this video that it seemed like people actually like these games way more than I had thought. What I can tell you about Anniversary is that this game, in comparison to the other 2 games in its continuity, feels more focused on gameplay with a heavier focus on puzzles, whereas the others for sure feel more story focused. Thankfully these days we have a reliable way to play the original Tomb Raider games, so even if the next remake is a letdown, at least we'll have those games. I just want to reiterate before I move on to the next part of the video, as I feel I've probably been harsh on the Survivor trilogy. It's not that I don't like these games or that I think they aren't good games. They're solid, but they leaned a bit too far into the gritty reboot trend that was happening at the time, at least for my taste. Lara basically spends the 3 games getting beaten up and smashed about, poor thing. It just starts to feel a bit like a trauma simulator. It felt like we kept being promised with each game that Lara will become the Tomb Raider she's meant to be, or that she's even become that Tomb Raider, and whilst we catch glimpses of her, stepping into a more confident, self-assured version of herself, confident and determined enough to fight 2 jaguars, may I add, with just a bow and a makeshift knife, it just doesn't ever feel consistent enough. I suspect this is because when the trilogy came out, it was positioned as an origin story rather than a complete reboot of who Lara is, or at least that's how it felt like it was marketed. But then as the games went on, the devs would put Easter eggs and references for fans, and homages to other iterations of Lara. And to me, it kind of felt like the devs weren't confident confident enough in their new version of Lara, so have her stuck in between being this new version and an older version of herself. One of the homages, for example, in the first game of the Survivor series is where Lara uses dual pistols at the end of the game to gun down the antagonist. A reference to Lara's iconic twin pistols from the classic games gave many players the idea that Lara is going to become the Tomb Raider from those older interpretations of her character. This clearly didn't happen, but I don't think fans of other interpretations of Lara were at fault for thinking this and wanting this. I think all of these Easter eggs and homages were an attempt to win over old school fans, but in some ways gave older fans hope for something that wasn't coming, at least in my case. Again, there is a lot to like about these series of games, including aspects of Lara's character, but it can feel inconsistent and push and pull with who she used to be or who she's supposed to become. For me personally, Survivor Lara is just missing that spark, that level of charisma that LAU Lara had, the wit, the charm that I came to adore from, yes, the classic games, but mostly from Legend and its other games in the series. I'm hoping that a unified Lara will give us a beautiful mix of all of these traits presented by each iteration of Lara, as I think they all have amazing qualities about them. And with what Alex Walton Regan said in an interview on the Press X to Continue podcast in reference to what this version of Lara could look like.
Is this version of Lara something we can that we can relate to in the sense of something we've seen before? Or is it brand new?
Bit of both, I would say. And genuinely, I'm not saying that to be convoluted. I think it is genuinely a bit of both. There's a lot of, it's sort of like the phrase that I'm working with is no Lara's left behind.
Okay, I like
so
that.
I like the idea of like no Lara's left behind, right? I've looked at all of the performances. Obviously, I've got all the scripts, so I know where it's going. And, you know, I think there's all of the Laras that have previously come before will also be informing this one as we move into a new era of Tomb Raider, I would say.
Okay.
I genuinely think that fans are going to love it. I want to insert a swear word, but it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I know what we're making. It's brilliant.
Also, after you're done with this video, go ahead and check out Press X to Continue. They do really solid content over there, and Alex's interview was a treat, so I highly recommend them. The main phrase or saying being, no Lara's left behind. I have high hopes for the future of Tomb Raider, and that we'll truly get the most nuanced version of Lara we've ever had. And I think Alex is going to do a bang-up job as the new voice for Lara Croft. She clearly deeply cares about this project, and I just can't wait to see what she does with this version of such a beloved character. Hey fellas, how's it going? Thank you for taking the time to watch the video, it's really appreciated, and if you haven't already, please do give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and go ahead and subscribe too. It really helps the channel and I'd appreciate it a lot. Also, thank you to everyone who watched my first real video essay. If you commented, liked, or subbed, you're a real one, thank you. Even if the comment was shitty or negative. Thank you, you still engaged with the content, and that's ultimately what I want. Like, whether I agree with you or not it's not relevant. I'm just happy someone's engaging with the content, so thank you either way. Also, it would be really cool to hear about your guys' relationship with the Tomb Raider franchise and what your favorite iteration of Lara is and why. You know, how you got introduced and what you hope for the future. I do have more videos in the oven, so stay tuned. They hopefully won't take as long as the last two have, though the Tomb Raider video is actually a faster turnaround than the Final Fantasy video, if you knew when I started making the Final Fantasy video. Before we go, I wasn't sure where to put this tidbit, so I thought I'd just put it at the end. Tomb Raider devs since the start have added in special death scenes or animations for Lara, and they range from bonkers to just very violent. So let's take a look at them as we close out the video.
Don't you think you've seen enough?
Like this, put your hands up, love the moment even from dusk. Yo, you always got my back, and of course I got your back. Don't you worry about that now. It's been a good day, good night.